the Israeli strike, but did not give their rank and said further details would be announced later. Iranian state television saying the targeted building was the residence of Iranian advisors in the Syrian capital, and there was no immediate comment that was made from Israel. Want to talk about this and all of the latest developments here. So Behnam Ben Taleblu, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, is joining us now live to discuss all of this. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, can you kind of break down the significance here of this airstrike and the death of those military advisors?
Absolutely. Well, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and in particular the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, had really been key over the past decade in bailing out and saving the Assad regime and literally aiding his war against his own people. They were further aided in this regard by the Russian government. But the Israelis have actually been kind of striking at various points, particularly in eastern Syria, of IRGC headquarters, barracks, buildings, facilities, taking out the installations that the Revolutionary Guards had been using in Syria to either surge weapons across Syria into Lebanon from Iran. This was part of Iran's regional land bridge strategy, basically connecting Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. And while they were also trying to stop the flow of munitions, as well as money and capabilities from Iran to Lebanon using Syria as a corridor, they've also been going after more IRGC officials as well as Hezbollah officials who are aiding Iran in their mission in Syria. They've done everything from drone strikes to missile strikes to airstrikes. This has been part of Israel's war between the wars campaign, trying to keep these Iran-backed networks at bay, particularly Syria. The success of this strategy so far is why you've seen less direct proxy action in Syria against Israel versus all of the other theaters. And most importantly, whenever the Israelis seem to have had intelligence, they've gone after even higher-ranking IRGC targets, such as the taking out of a major commander there about 3.5 or 4 weeks ago.
And again, a lot of developments. I say it literally every day, but there's developments pretty much on an hourly basis here. I want to talk a little bit about this because Israel's War Cabinet Minister Eisenkot seeming to kind of disagree with Netanyahu and saying only a ceasefire will lead to the freeing of the hostages. The disagreements between these top Israeli officials, what kind of role could they play in the future of the war itself?
Well, anyone who knows anything about Israel knows that there's no shortage of views or factions, even now when you do have a national unity government, or a national unity cabinet, I should say. Ultimately, I think time will tell, based on the relationship, A, between Israel and America, the longer the war goes on, B, how different factions within that war cabinet may think it may be there to their domestic political advantage to air different grievances, and C, the reality of the mission before them, whether the mission, if you define it as immediate as destroying Hamas, or you define it as immediately as getting all the hostages back, or you define it as, if we're going to be successful first in the south, we need to sufficiently deter other Iran-backed networks, so that means striking back more forcefully in the north. I would expect some more of these grievances to continue to come out, particularly as they look to affect different domestic political situations, be it A, in Israel, or B, even in America. As you know, the Israel-Gaza war is certainly heating up to be a domestic political issue in 2024 for us.
I want to talk about Netanyahu's comments a few days ago about a two-state solution. He is essentially saying that is not going to happen. The U.S. has been pushing for that to happen once the war is over. Is that showing any kind of disconnect between the U.S. and Israel?
In general, as an outside observer and someone who lives and works in Washington, I would say the less daylight there is between Israel and America, the better off it is for both countries. And while different U.S. administrations have indeed pushed, sometimes when the facts on the ground did not even support the case for a two-state solution, not only Netanyahu, but I think now many Israelis see the state lit that Hamas had created in Gaza not necessarily being a feasible partner for peace. So, one could excuse, particularly after October 7, the lack of optimism in a peace process which has still failed to deliver. But I think ultimately time will tell. I'm not sure the answer is transplanting some of the political dinosaurs from the West Bank into Gaza, but that does seem to be something that the Europeans are keen to push for. And one major area of disagreement I would look to in 2024 is particularly if the Gaza war winds down, is not disagreements between America and Israel, but disagreements between Europe and Israel, who indeed are pushing for this kind of political transplant scenario to effectuate exactly what the opposite of Netanyahu said, which is to resurrect the peace process on the back end of a war.
Hezbollah is essentially refusing to move its troops away from the Lebanon-Israel border, and there's sirens sounding in places that they rarely do sound there. Are we headed for a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah at this point? Is that even, I guess, clear?
You know, in the Middle East, there's always more problems, not less, and I really would advise folks to keep their eyes peeled on the area south of the Litani River, in Lebanon, as well as northern Israel, where you have over 100,000 internally displaced folks, people who have had to flee their homes, people who quite literally saw the national tragedy of October 7 to their south, and that was from an entity like Hamas, and then now know what Hezbollah, another terrorist entity in Iran's quote-unquote actors of resistance are, and rightly fear coming back and rightly fear Hezbollah's ability to escalate and press this conflict. You know, every single day on the Israel-Lebanon border, there is a new normal. There is a new deterrence being established. Hezbollah is using different weapons, firing at different targets. The Israelis are firing at different locations. Still, it has not become an all-out war, but I will tell you, the risks of a third Lebanon war are now much greater than ever, and some could say that it's a matter of when and not if.
Want to talk about the Houthis right now, because we know that the U.S. has led another strike, of course, against Yemen and the Houthis. Are any of these strikes actually deterring the Houthis? Is this going to stop those attacks in the Red Sea?
This is an excellent question, because deterrence is as much political as it is military. You have to affect the psychology of the adversary. And the problem is, sometimes if an adversary has a very sticky reputation of your weakness, of your irresolution, if you've done things to undermine your own case, even when you do things to help your own case, it's going to take a lot of repetition of that action to get rid of that sticky image and replace it with something tougher, or cement it, you should say. And in this case, some of the strikes earlier from the administration, even though they had the UK and even though they targeted massive depots, which is one way you can handicap or defang the Houthis by going after the weapons caches and, you know, limiting the flow of what Iran can send them, it may have looked to the Houthis like a loaded gun in a shaky hand. Now, I think even though we are targeting less in terms of numbers of missiles and numbers of targets, there is the chance to actually have more success if the administration is willing to repeat it over time. And what I mean by that is the past two strikes, because thus far there have been at least 5 strikes by the administration inside Yemen with force overtly responding to the Houthis. At least the last 2 of them have been targeting missiles that were quite literally being put on transporter erector launchers or rail launchers. So quite literally anti-ship cruise missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles that were being moved and were getting in position to be fired. And so for the U.S. to have been able to detect that means that they have had dynamic ISR, very good intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance across the Yemeni coastline. And that could be a potential change. The more eyes we have on this theater, the better we can stop these kind of actions and tell Yemeni missile engineers and their rocketry forces there is very limited room for upward advancement in this field. So not only crippling the weapon systems that actually launch what's left of these missiles, but actually kind of eroding this force, again, if repeated over time, could, I repeat, could affect their resolve and restore deterrence.
I want to talk about all of these different terror organizations and kind of how they stack up to each other, because we've heard Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, we've heard the terms over and over again over the past several months, but how do each of these terror organizations actually compare to one another?
You know, it's an excellent question, because the glue or the connective tissue that holds them all together is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They all have one major state patron, and that really indeed is the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, the Islamic Republic of Iran. In some cases, these terrorist groups, these members of what Iran calls the axis of resistance, in some cases like Hezbollah in Lebanon, or some of the Shia militias in Iraq, or if you go older in history, the Badr Corps in Iraq, Iran literally created these groups. So took advantage of a jurisdiction of weak central authority, or took advantage of a downtrodden community, supported it materially, politically, financially, and created it into this terror group that we know today. That's one method. The other method is Iran witnessed, or the Islamic Republic of Iran witnessed, a certain constituency already fighting, a group that is already formed, and sought to co-opt that group and bring it towards it because it was shooting at someone that the regime in Tehran wanted to shoot at. And that's precisely the case with Hamas in Gaza, and much more recently, based on our previous discussion, with the Houthis in Yemen. And every different kind of actor gets a different kind of capability from Iran based on the different kind of target set that they have. So Iran has helped Hamas get longer range rockets, not by trafficking those whole systems, but by supporting local production with raw materials that were supposed to be for something else. Iran has also bolstered Hamas's anti-tank weapon capabilities because of the close-in fighting that they have. Compare that to the Hezbollah in Lebanon, for example, where they have at least over 150,000 rockets, mortars, and missiles. The transition away from rockets to missiles, rockets which are unguided and missiles which are guided, is brought to you by this revolution, this precision-guided munitions revolution that Iran is trying to effectuate to take Hezbollah's quantitative advantage, move it into a qualitative advantage. Then you go down south to the Houthis. The Houthis, despite being the newest member of this axis, they actually have the most lethal long-range strike capabilities. They're the only ones with medium-range ballistic missiles. They're the only ones who have paraded and to have used anti-ship ballistic missiles. And more importantly, they were the first to have used land attack cruise missiles. So different capability for a different actor in a different geography. And this is precisely how Iran can keep the mayhem going in the Middle East.
All right. Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much for taking the time to help break all of this down. Developments all the time, so we appreciate when experts like you can come on and break it down for everyone at home. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
I would just add one small footnote with respect, which is that while for many in the Middle East there is a pre-October 7 and a post-October 7 Middle East, there are issues that started well before and will linger well after. And I want to bring one issue to the forefront for you and your viewers, and that is the Iran nuclear issue. You've had the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency really flailing since October 7th, trying to generate political interest and political attention on really the thing that had united the world for for many years, even uniting America and Europe and getting different levels of attention from the issue on Israel and the Arabs, and that is Iran's fast evolving nuclear capability. They already have enough material for several warheads if they wish to enrich further. Independent experts say they can have at least 7 to 9 bombs, if not more, depending on how you count, within several months. And you had some astonishing comments by the head of the IEA at Davos recently, where he talked about Iran is literally holding the IEA, that's the UN's nuclear watchdog monitoring agency, as hostage. They literally are hostage to the government of the Islamic Republic. Capabilities of Iran are going up and monitoring is going down. So there is more to worry about, and we have less eyes on what we need to be worrying about. So Iran could indeed be trying to continue to arm and support all these terrorist proxy fighters across the Middle East and continue with that main original threat that had united the international community against it for over 2 decades now, and that's the nuclear issue. And slowly but surely, as Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, is looking to build a legacy, he could be moving towards this very dangerous capability. So we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, focus on the regional as well as the nuclear.
A lot of great details there. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on this Saturday morning. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.